Welcome back to the channel, guys. This week was a real nail-biter, so let's get into what happened this week. If you haven't already, do please like and subscribe so you won't miss out any future releases, and also go and check out the Facebook page so that you can upload any of your own photos and your projects that you're working on. Anyway, back to turn 4, sorry. What actually happened? So we had movement on all fronts. So in the south we had General Johnson and the Union forces both engaging each other. In the center we had General Fremont marching north with General Shields marching south to try and trap General Jackson. And over in the east we had General Ewell advancing on Manassas Gap. Pretty important events. Because they're going to shape basically the course of the campaign. Definitely a very interesting turn. There were a few random events that happened, like thick fog across the whole of the region, so each of the battles were going to be covered in fog. So we ended up with the 3 battles. The first one up was going to be the biggest one, and that was the second battle for Newmarket. We had General Fremont's force coming up first. Later on they would be reinforced by General Shields versus Jackson's force, and on turn 4 a small reinforcement coming up behind General Fremont. So for the start of the game, all of the troops are blinds due to the thick fog that has occurred. We've got Jackson's command marching south, and we've got General Fremont marching north. They won't be able to see each other until they get to within 6. And at that point they'll start to be able to be aware of who they're up against and the fact that they've both blundered into each other in this battlefield. So turn 1 was a pretty devastating turn for General Fremont. So their forces were advancing through the thick fog and they blundered into each other. Unfortunately the Confederates had cavalry at the head of their column, so they were the first things to arrive, and they immediately charged the Union. Union troops tried to form a battle line but were hit early, so they did get 2 volleys off and did inflict some casualties but got charged. In the confusion they were basically cut to pieces. They lost the melee, and as they turned to flee both the regiments were dispersed and ridden down. And we'll just check if the commander, General Fremont himself, is caught. He's fine, he manages to outrun them and get back, but devastating first turn for the Union forces. Turn 2's movement phase, the cavalry have charged forwards and are flanking the gun and just charging it. Union infantry have fallen back behind the stone wall, and more Confederate infantry are marching up and just coming into view. So a tricky turn for the Union. End of turn 2 recap. So Confederates carried on their advance. The Union tried to form a defensive position, but the Confederate cavalry charged the artillery piece. One of the units was smashed, but the other went through them and has come over the wall behind the Union infantry. So very bad for the Union at turn 2. 3 movements saw the Union pulling back slightly, just to try and create an avenue of escape. The Confederates advanced their main force down the road, and the cavalry have just withdrawn back across the wall. Next turn the Confederates reinforcements coming up from the south will arrive on this board edge, which is an infantry and an artillery piece, so the Union can't escape that way, hence their attempt to escape across the fields. So at the end of turn 3 there is a bit of small arms fire. General Fremont took a minor wound, 1 point of damage, but nothing too major. But yeah, no destruction of the Union at this stage. So at turn 4 the Confederates have had their reinforcements coming up from the south. They're closing in on the Union troops. The Union, probably in our forts, would get caught as they withdrew. They've got cavalry coming around this flank, they've got infantry coming around that. By the time they've crossed the wall they're going to get shot at, so they're probably not going to be able to escape. So they are going to surrender. Then on turn 9 we would have the follow-up column under General Shields arriving, but due to the distances across the field and the fact that there's fog, which is going to mean that the artillery can't fire, there won't really, in our opinion, be enough time for them to deploy and get into the fight by the time the turn 15 comes around. So we are going to call this one as a Confederate victory, and we will see how things move on the strategic map. Cool, so this is the Battle of Manassas Gap, and again we've got the thick fog, and we had the Union troops marching out as their orders were to attack Front Royal, whilst the Confederates have been heading this way from Front Royal, and due to the thick fog they've kind of stumbled into each other, so they're starting with 20 centimetres distance between each other, and at 10 they'll be able to see who is who. On turn 7, the Union reinforcements will be coming on, who will have crossed at Front Royal and will be coming in this direction. Turn 1 saw both forces kind of bundling down the road, and they appeared through the fog, fired a few shots but pretty ineffective, and that was about it for turn 1. So the end of turn 2 was a catastrophe for the Union forces. As their troops marched forwards and exchanged fire with the Confederates, the commander of their force was killed. In the ensuing confusion, the infantry routed, mixed with the loss of the commander, the volley which they took, breaking the infantry, the cavalry have also fallen back. So the Union force is collapsing. Jump forwards to turn 7 when the Union reinforcements have arrived. In the interim, we have attempted to do the firing from the artillery onto the cavalry, and a bit of movement and repositioning. The Union cavalry have just formed up, holding sort of in a little foggy corner behind this hedgerow. Union reinforcements now coming on from Front Royal, that's 2 regiments. The Confederates have started to form a bit of a defensive position with their gun and infantry facing off in both directions. Turn 8 saw the Union cavalry advance just slightly, just pinning the Confederate infantry in place, whilst the 2 regiments started advancing up towards the Confederates. The artillery fired and inflicted a few casualties on the regiment in grey, but that was it. 9 saw the infantry just reaching engagement range, and they put a volley into the back of the Confederates. Union artillery fired onto the Union infantry and inflicted a few more wounds, but nothing too major. So everything to play for in this game. 10 is an interesting one. So the Union infantry have advanced up towards the flank. The Union cavalry have both charged. They've seen movement in the fog. They weren't sure if they were skirmishers or formed units, and they've charged. So we'll find out what happens this turn. At the end of turn 10, we did a cavalry charge. However, both were repulsed by the infantry, inflicting devastating fire onto the cavalry. So with that, the Union forces are going to withdraw from the field. Of turn 1, we saw the Union advancing through the fog towards the Confederates. On the left, out of the fog, charged a Union cavalry regiment to engage the rebels. A swirling melee ensued, which is going to continue till next turn, seeing as they suffered equal casualties. So at the end of turn 2, the Union infantry started to come through the fog and started to exchange musket fire with the Confederates. On the left, the melee was so wild that both regiments basically disintegrated in disorder. So no one is superior or inferior at this stage. It's still anyone's game. End of turn 4, all the Union troops have come through the fog, and it's now musket fire between the 2 sides trying to destroy one another. With a giant rebel yell, the entire front line of Confederates charges forwards to engage the Union. Out of the fog come the bayonets. So the rebel yell clashed into the Union. There were a lot of casualties on both sides, and the Union troops in all situations were forced back, breaking under the strain, and they ran back into the fog. So this is a Confederate victory. So after that turn, how does it leave our strategic position overall? Well, in the south, General Johnson and the Confederates now have the advantage. They can push on, or they can stay where they are. In the centre, with General Fremont out of it, they're basically back to parity between Jackson and General Shields. And with Ewell having seized Manassas Gap, that's destroyed the supplies for the Union to be able to come through at that position. So it now frees up Ewell to either hold or move off to either go north or to try and carry on engaging Union forces. So it's a real game changer. How were the armies positioned after their battles? So General Jackson's army, again, relatively unscathed, to be honest, because really it was only the cavalry that did any of the fighting. And so yeah, they took a little bit of damage, but after the reorganisation, after the logistical supplies and reinforcements came up, yeah, more or less they're in pretty good condition. They didn't really lose many troops still. General Garnett, who was the reinforcements who came up to help General Jackson, again, their forces are a bit depleted, but they were a bit depleted previously, so they didn't take any further casualties this turn. So, if anything, just a slight boost. For the Union forces at the Battle of New Market, the whole force surrendered, broken, routed, surrendered, or destroyed. So that army group is pretty well out of the fight henceforth. Over at Manassas Gap, we had General Ewell. His forces, they took a little bit of a pounding, but nothing too major. They then had the bonus as well of taking Manassas Gap, which gave them additional resupply points. Whilst the Union troops who were engaged against General Ewell, we've said General Milroy here, 3 of the regiments are either missing in action or captured, whilst 2 infantry brigades were able to withdraw back to Front Royal, so not particularly good for them. General Johnson's forces down in the south, a bit of a mixed bag. They did take some casualties, like the cavalry got quite badly beaten, and the 1st Infantry Brigade took a few casualties themselves, but overall not terrible. Whilst the Union forces who were against them, they lost badly. So it's going to take them quite a while to reorganise. So, based on the current situation, we've got a few options for the Union in turn 5. So option number 1 sees the troops down in the south just withdrawing and trying to move back on their lines of supply. In the centre we've got General Shields, who just attacks Jackson, and then the troops here at Front Royal cross the river and then set up a defensive position. Our second plan is for our southern chaps to keep going sort of double pace to try and get back. Again, Shields to attack, and our guys over in the west to hold at Front Royal. Option number 3 is for General Shields and the chaps from Front Royal to create a defensive position, whilst again the chaps down on the south, they just withdraw as fast as they possibly can. And then our fourth option is just a general withdrawal, with everyone heading north as much as they can do, just to get back to more defensive positions. It's going to be a bit of defensive work for the next few turns until the Union troops can reorg, get reinforced and ready to go again. As for the Confederates, they're currently in a really good spot. So option 1 sees Johnson pursuing and trying to eliminate. We send the detachment under General Garnett down to try and cut off the retreating Federals in the west. Jackson goes after General Shields, and General Ewell pursues the Union forces that just withdrew from his battle at Manassas Gap. So quite an aggressive move, trying to catch and destroy. Option number 2, basically the same again, but instead of sending the troops around to try and trap the Union in the west, the detachment joins Jackson, and then the combined forces go after General Shields in the centre. Option 3, again, same basic plan, but that detachment, instead of going after shields or over into the west, heads into the valleys and then can move north over the next few turns to try and sabotage the Union supply depots. And then our next option is for General Jackson to hold in the centre, because his army is a little bit beaten up, and that way gives him a turn to prevent the Union from moving south whilst he resupplies. General Ewell to take Front Royal again, General Johnson to pursue the enemy, and then those detachments to speed march again, a little bit faster this time, to try and cut off the Union retreat. So, a few different options for us to mull over. So it was quite an exciting turn, and I'm really looking forward to what comes next. What does turn 5 hold for us as we approach the halfway point of the whole campaign? There's quite a few random events to come and historical events, so everything's still to play for. Anyway, thanks very much, guys. I hope you're enjoying as much as I am. Do please like and subscribe, and I'll see you next time.